Welcome back to part 3 of calling for help. To recap very quickly, when you dial 911, as soon as the dispatcher has finished her little intro, you're going to state your name, your phone number from which you're calling in case you get disconnected, they can call you back, your location, and then a very simple explanation of what's happening. Nobody needs stories, especially your victim. They just want the response as quick as possible. If someone is ill or injured, that's all you need to say. My friend fell down, hit his head. That's a medical call. My 6-month-old is choking. When it's the littles, throw in the age. My 2-year-old is something. Could be having a seizure, could be bleeding. They know that's medical. Now, the one on the phone with you is sharing the information with the one who is actually doing the dispatching. That one is going to find out the closest medical unit that's available and start rolling them. The one that answered is going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, answer the questions. If it's an accident of some sort, let's say we're sitting here and all of a sudden there's a screeching of brakes and a crunch of metal. Is that an accident? Is it an emergency? Well, how do we know? Remember, we go and look. So I'm going to look out the front window. And I see that there are 2 cars. They bumped into each other. The drivers have gotten out. They're yelling at each other. But both appear to be okay. They're moving around. The skin color looks normal. They aren't bleeding. I don't see any other signs of possible emergency. I probably will not make any phone calls. I may or may not, depending on circumstances, yell out and say, hey, everybody okay? Do you need me to call somebody, etc., etc.? But I may not. Now, that's different than we hear screeching of brakes, crunching of metal, a horn goes off and is not stopping. We look. From underneath one car, there is fluid running onto the street. The other vehicle, the engine is smoking. That's an emergency. We have no idea what the fluid is. Do not assume. We never assume. But it's green. It's got to be coolant. Yes, but there might be gasoline mixed into that. There might be water from the radiator. There might be some oil or transmission fluid. We don't know, and we're not going to go to investigate because that would not be safe. Fluid is fluid. That's the end of that one. The other vehicle, you see smoke. That's all you say. You tell them what it is you see. Do not assume anything. If you see flames coming out of the vehicle, then you can say that. But if it's just smoke, you tell them it's smoke. You only see one driver. Where's the other one? We don't know. You can guess, but you don't know. The driver that you do see is kind of stumbling around, having a difficult time keeping his balance. You would say, I see one driver who appears to be stumbling. Now, why is that different from the first one? This one, they're going to possibly need law enforcement, depending on where you live, for crowd control. block off the streets, etc. They're going to need fire and rescue, and they're going to need at least one ambulance. The other dispatcher is figuring out who's available, getting them going. The one that answered the phone is going to be asking you a bunch of questions to find out more information. The other dispatcher may decide to start rolling more units. We always love the help. People often ask as EMS, why does fire always show up with you? Because we need the manpower to lift patients, to do things, to get things done. It's easier to have 5 people working on you than 2. It's faster for you too. Now, what's a vehicle? That could be anything from a motorcycle all the way up to an 18-wheeler. So when you're describing the vehicles, when you say vehicles, we typically think as dispatch passenger cars. So you can get specific on that. There is a minivan versus a motorcycle. There is a big school bus versus a car. There is a baby school bus versus a motorcycle. It could be a vehicle versus a bicycle. There could be multiple victims if there are vehicles, because we don't know. We can't always see inside, especially buses. So when you're describing victims, if you're not sure, multiple works. We're just going to start rolling everybody. If it's multi-vehicle, you can just state there's been a multi-vehicle accident. Approximately how many cars are involved, if you can guess or count very quickly. Depending again on the area in which you're located, if there's fluid leaking out from an 18-wheeler, that could be hazmat. In rural areas, most do not have hazmat. They're going to have to call a town or 2 or 3 or 5 away. So they need to know that up front. So to go back to the beginning, there's a 2-vehicle accident, 18-wheeler versus a school bus. Fluid is leaking from one of the vehicles. The other vehicle, the engine is smoking. Multiple victims possible, and you're done. To share the story end of it, I have helped fill in for dispatch when there is need. And I answered a call from Gladys, sweetest little old lady you'd ever want to talk to. 911, what is your emergency? Hi, my name is Gladys, and I don't think my husband's doing well. What's wrong, Gladys? Well, he's making really weird sounds, like he's having trouble breathing. I got her address, I got her phone number. We started rolling medical. What's the problem? Well, we were having a discussion on what he wanted to have for dinner. And he wanted this, and I was going to make that. And then we got into an argument. And then it came down to discussing the vegetables. And I finally got done with dinner, and I put it on the table, and he started eating. And then he got all weird and started coughing. And then he tried to get up, and then he passed out onto the floor. And now he's making gurgly sounds. All right. Number 1. Let's call the husband Harold. Harold doesn't care. Harold just needs help. The stories can come later. And it was kind of hard to get Gladys back on track to telling me what had actually happened. So with that type of phone call, my husband is possibly choking. He's passed out. He's making gurgly sounds. Not responsive. That's it. Stories can wait. Yes, we did get to him on time, and we did get him back to being okay without having to go to the hospital. All right. So, brief description, very brief, 1 or 2 sentences. If you've got a little, throw in the age. If you've got one of the olds, my 80-something-year-old, my 90-something-year-old. And for everybody else, if you've got somebody with a medical issue, my autistic son, my autistic 35-year-old is, my Down syndrome child is. All right. That can be important. But you don't want to get into stories about it, just very briefly. All righty? Got it? All right. Stay tuned for the next episode. Finding the off button. I'm getting better with this, aren't I? All right, you don't need to agree. Bye.